Hi, I'm Steve Pleich, and I'll be your host for this edition of Voices from the Village. Tonight we're going to be talking about Measure Q. It's a $310 million bond issue that is supposed to be helping out Cabrillo College in certain ways, and we'll be talking about whether or not that is in fact true, or whether or not the arguments against the ballot measure are well taken. I'm happy to welcome Dr. Ray Kaupp. Ray, welcome to you, and Bruce Holloway, an old friend. Bruce, welcome back. Before we get into talking about the pros and cons of Measure Q, I want to take a look at just a clip we have about Cabrillo College. And everybody, I think, in Santa Cruz County knows about Cabrillo. They either have somebody who went there, they took a class there, they know somebody who knows somebody who took a class, so they're familiar with Cabrillo. But I think it would be good to just kind of refresh everybody's recollection about what a wonderful institution it is and all the fine, services and educational things they offer. So let's take a look at that now.
Cabrillo College, founded in 1959, is situated on a beautiful 162-acre campus overlooking the Pacific Ocean in the small beach community of Aptos. Located just 5 miles from the city of Santa Cruz and a short drive away from the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and the Monterey Peninsula, there are few locations more compelling to earn your degree or certificate than in the Monterey Bay Area of California.
It's hard to find a place better than Santa Cruz County if you're interested in surfing, mountain biking, hiking, any sort of things that's outdoors. Can't really beat the weather here and all the activities on the Monterey Bay.
Offering over 100 academic and career technical education programs, Cabrillo's high-quality education combined with the intimate and friendly campus atmosphere attracts over 17,000 students a year, including many international students.
I went to a lot of community college in California. I think the Cabrillo is the best one.
I've met so many different types of people, and it's really interesting just taking a walk through the campus and seeing all the different cultures and diversity here.
Cabrillo College offers a wide range of classes and attracts the highest quality staff who are fully engaged to help students achieve their academic, career, and personal development goals.
These teachers are teaching because it's what they want to study, it's what they want to learn, it's what they want to pass on to other students and help let that grow in their mind.
There's an amazingly supportive atmosphere among administrators, the staff that's really dedicated to serving students here. And I cannot believe how lucky I am to get to teach with the faculty that we have here at Cabrillo.
In addition to its excellent instructors and a wide range of classes, Cabrillo College offers lots of opportunities to participate in extracurricular activities.
There's a lot of clubs, and there's a lot of petitions for a lot of things. People here are really active politically, and I actually really like that a lot. People want to get in with politics, and they want to get in with our government. They want to figure out what's happening.
Among its many accomplishments, Cabrillo College is ranked #1 in transfers to nearby UC Santa Cruz, and many students transfer to other four-year universities in the area, such as Cal Berkeley and UC Davis.
Every year we have students who have graduated and come back to Cabrillo, and they've been to places like Harvard or Yale or UC Berkeley, and without exception they say the best teachers they ever had were right here at Cabrillo.
With its attractive location, its dedicated and professional staff, Diverse course offerings and excellent state-of-the-art facilities, Cabrillo College offers you a world of opportunity for a very low cost.
You are now officially Cabrillo College graduates. Congratulations.
And a wonderful local treasure and educational institution. Bruce was commenting that if Cabrillo were not there, and you saw the overviews, he would pay $310 million to put it there. But we don't maybe need another $310 million. Let's let the viewers know a little bit about you. Dr. Ray Kaupp, I looked at your CV, very impressive. Tell us just a little bit about yourself before we start talking about Measure Q.
Okay. Well, I'm not an educator from the get-go. I was a business person for 25 years. I have an MBA from Berkeley. I've served as a chief operating officer, a CEO. I've also served as a CFO of a nonprofit for a couple of years. We had sold a company to Cisco a while back, and I was looking for something interesting to do. My wife suggested I try teaching. So I got a part-time job teaching at the community college. I got interested in doing that as a second career. I went back to school and got a doctorate in education, and was offered a full-time teaching job at Cabrillo. I've been there 11 years now, and I'm a tenured professor of business at Cabrillo now.
That's interesting, and I appreciate your stepping up as a spokesperson for the No on Measure Q. I know that you're a busy person, and oftentimes we don't really have as much time and energy we'd like to devote to even very important issues, but you've, I think, been a very articulate spokesperson for this, and looking forward to hearing more about the arguments. Bruce Holloway, old friend, you and I go back a little ways, spending some time at the Santa Cruz City Council, and you and I have talked about your activism in San Lorenzo Valley and places like that. Tell us a little bit about yourself and really how you got involved with the Measure Q.
Well, I grew up over in Sunnyvale, and I went to De Anza Community College. One summer before I got my driver's license, my best friend and I rode our bikes over Highway 9 all the way to Santa Cruz to the beach, and that was when I discovered San Lorenzo Valley. So I went to college at UC Santa Barbara, and after I finished down there, I moved to SLV. I moved to Ben Lomond, and I've lived in Boulder Creek for about 25 years, and worked for more than 30 years in Silicon Valley as a computer engineer.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I started hearing about that Cabrillo was going to have a bond issue around the end of last year, I guess, and so I started. I guess around February, I began trying to learn about it and develop some opinions about the bond, and that's. And then I met Ray because he wrote the ballot argument against Measure Q,
which I have read, and it's worth noting that we don't really have people here for Yes on Q. One of our other show hosts here, Lou Tuasto, will be doing a Yes on Q show at some future time. We can, as public access television, take a position, if we like, on any ballot measure. So we're not really having any conflict of interest with the show that I think really will explain to folks why Measure Q is not sound policy. So let me give you, I'll just read a little bit about the argument in favor of Q. This is from the ballot. They're saying that Yes on Q increases opportunity for local students and veterans to earn college credits, provides excellent training that prepares students to transfer. Cabrillo honors scholars have an 80% transfer rate to UCLA and 90% to Berkeley. Student veterans and local workers rely on Cabrillo for essential job training. They say Measure Q particularly provides students with up-to-date technology and upgrades science and computer labs. and expands access to training programs that help students learn new skills and find better paying jobs. That's the argument for. So that kind of frames what the people in favor of Q are saying.
Sure.
Why isn't, although those are wonderful ideas and wonderful concepts, why isn't this good policy, not only for the taxpayer, but for Cabrillo College itself?
Well, I think everybody in the community loves Cabrillo College. I think there's a sense that, that it provides great value to the community. All of the things that were described there are things that happen with teachers in classrooms.
Interesting.
And nothing in the bond, one of the restrictions on Prop 39 bonds is that you can't spend any of that money on teachers or administrators, that it's only for facilities. And you can use it for technology. You can use it for some kinds of repairs as long as it's a capital improvement. For example, you can't patch a roof, but you can replace a roof. But there's nothing in the bond that provides additional instructional time or additional instructional opportunities because that's not allowed in Prop 39 bonds.
Well, you said an interesting thing earlier that I did not know, is you can't bond something that longer than the useful life of the thing you're bonding it for, which I didn't realize. So, for instance, you were saying you can't get a 20-year bond for a 5-year, for a computer that's going to be obsolete in 5 years.
That's true. There's a restriction of 120% of the life of the asset on the timing of the bond. So if you bought an asset that was going to last five years, then you could finance it for 6 years, 120% of that life. And there's a whole industry that works around getting around those kinds of restrictions. So if it's a furniture fixture bolted to the building, it may be part of the building, and then you can count it as part of the building. So there's some gray areas there, but the basic rule is that you shouldn't be able to fund take a loan out that's longer than the life of the asset.
Bruce, your observations about some of this that I was saying about the argument for Measure Q?
When I read the argument for, I was kind of thinking, where's the beef? Because I would expect to see a specific project list for a bond issue. So I'm a little bit surprised. This is very open-ended. That's really one of the main problems that I see with it. Their SLV had a school bond in 2008, and we knew that the library had been damaged in a fire. We had to rebuild the library. They got some insurance money, but we needed some bond money for a new library. They made improvements to the Performing Arts Center, and these specific projects were in the bond proposal, so we were aware when we voted for that what we were getting. So this one, it's difficult for me to understand what we're really buying, and so that's something I don't like about it, and it seems unusual to me because I think I probably voted for. I'm really sure I voted for every education bond in my life, and I felt good about the SLV bond, but not this one.
And I did notice in some of the literature that I had written, which I was frankly not familiar with, that there were two previous bond measures that were passed. It was C and D that were both still that are still being paid down and won't be paid down until 2039 or something like that. And yet now layered on top of that is another $23 per 100,000 property tax assessment. What are the taxpayers' concerns about this?
Well, let me take that one.
Okay,
go ahead first.
So, if you get a property tax bill, actually I brought mine, but Ray and I are both homeowners, and so we pay property taxes. This year's bill had $22 for one of those previous issues, and
per 100,000.
Per 100,000 of assessed valuation. One was $22, one was $14.50. So we are currently paying $36 per 100,000 of assessed valuation. So if your house is worth $500,000, that would be $180 a year.
Right.
They just refinanced those two issues. Actually, there's a slide that
okay, great.
that talks about this.
Put that slide up if we can.
So they refinanced, and they're going to save us a little bit of money, but it's only about 87 cents. So we've been paying $36, and we're going to continue paying about $36. And then the Measure Q would be another $23.27 on top of that. And one of the things I think is interesting about this slide, right in the middle of it, you can see the date 2059. That is how long we will be paying on Measure Q. It's really 5 bond issues in one. It's not that they're going to borrow all this money at once. They're going to do it in a series of issuances, and every 3 years, so that the 5th one they're planning on issuing in 2029, and those will be 30-year bonds that will not be fully paid off until 2059, which for people in our age group, that means the rest of our natural lives.
And maybe more.
I noticed that I did read the rebuttal to the argument in favor of Q, and Ray, you had written this yourself, said only one-third of the faculty senate voted to support it. You say that Cabrillo is already overbuilt. There's 150,000 square feet of underutilized space, as you say, and then although half of the proceeds for the bond will be used for facilities renovation and maintenance projects, although not specified in the measure, and thus essentially an unlimited credit line, the bonds will likely be issued on a 20 to 30-year terms at an estimated $623 million cost to taxpayers.
Right.
Yeah, pretty strong arguments, for sure.
Yeah, there's, I mean, some of that is like this thing about whether the faculty supports it or not. That's become, sort of a controversy. In the community. It was one of the things that we discussed outside of the Superior Court in the crafting of that ballot argument, because the college wanted to change the wording of that ballot argument. And the original, where those numbers come from, there's 24 senators at the college. When the vote was taken as to whether to support the bond, I'm on the faculty senate. I represent my division on the faculty senate, along with another person.
You're elected by other faculty members.
Yeah, I'm elected to the faculty senate and represent the Bella Business English Language Arts division, along with there's an English professor who's also co-represents that division. And we had a vote on whether to support the bond or not, and there were 6 people who voted in favor of supporting the bond in that vote. And the details of that vote was there were 6 in favor, there were 2 opposed, there were 9 abstentions.
Which do not count as votes by Robert's Rules of Order, I know that well.
Well, technically they count as going along with whatever the decision of the other folks is. So technically, the faculty senate did decide to support the bond. But the reality of that vote is, I mean, we never have a vote like, we don't take a vote unless we can have a consensus. Normally we would say, let's defer that vote. But this had to get rushed through to make this June ballot. So,
and go ahead, Bruce, please.
Well, because of my interest, I went to the Board of Trustees meeting in March when they voted to put this on the ballot. It was a pretty interesting meeting. It went on for hours. That's the only Board of Trustees meeting I've ever been to.
Really?
For Cabrillo. And one of the things I remember was the president of the Faculty Senate, Dr. Robin McFarland. She told the board that she was disappointed that the faculty had not been involved in the decision more. She said she wished that they had been involved 10 months earlier. So that's really one of the reasons, I think, for all those abstentions. The faculty wasn't really brought into the process. And I would say the same thing for the community. I was looking at agenda packets recently, and the superintendent had said that she had talked to 30 community influencers, people like George Howe, Fred McPherson, and you know, there's a lot of, you know, probably
George R. Jr. and Robert McFarland are identified on the ballot as supporters of the measure. So you know, they are the identified, you know, supporters. So that's very powerful.
But still, at the board meeting, she expressed reservations about the way that it had happened.
Yeah. I think, as so often happens, when you have prominent people speaking in favor of something, then sometimes the minority voice, and come June 7, they may not be the minority voice, but the minority voice sometimes is just not heard. Tell us the story about you having to go to court just to get your ballot statement accepted by the Department of Elections. I did see some of your pleadings, and you were in front of Judge Gallagher, but tell us that story, because I think it's a fascinating insight into how the powerful sometimes can control, you know, the expression of a minority voice, at least in the outset of any kind of a discussion about public affairs.
Yeah, and I think we need to be careful about how we characterize it as a minority voice.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Because, you know, I was at an event last night, and people I don't know came up to me and thanked me for speaking out because they didn't feel like they could because of their position.
Right.
And you know, I don't know if the faculty at Cabrillo was split 40-60 or 60-40 or 50-50 or 30-70, and I don't know which way.
Right.
I know there are many folks on the faculty at Cabrillo, because these are my colleagues who have expressed sort of support for what I'm doing. But it's hard. It's hard. The college has closed ranks. Once that decision is made, it's an organization that honors the process, and the process made this decision, and the fact that it made a kind of a crazy decision.
Well,
they don't really.
Okay, so I've learned a lot in the last few months. One of the things I learned is that there's a section in the Education Code, and this was part of Prop 39, which was passed back in 2000.
Which we were discussing earlier.
So there's a section in the Education Code that puts a limit on how much a community college district can ask for in one election, and the limit is $25. What they're asking for is $23.27, which is 93%.
So a $23 assessment on each 100,000.
Per 100,000 of assessed valuation. So they're asking for 93% of what the law allows in a single election. They don't have a specific project list, but their polling has told them that Cabrillo is so popular that they think that people will vote for this, and as long as people are going to vote for it, no matter what the price is, they are going for the maximum. They're going for all the marbles in one election here.
And now, as I understand it, that's relatively unprecedented to ask for that large a percentage of the maximum. Is that true or not?
I'm not sure that's true. I think these, you know, there's something like $20 billion of Prop 39 bonds on the ballot in California this year. There's an industry that promotes these bonds, that sells these bonds, and you know, to poll at the poll the population at the maximum amount and see if they'll go for it. I think is certainly the folks who put the bonds out and who sell the bonds make a lot more money on a $300 million bond than on a $60 million bond.
And you know, my characterization of this as a minority voice, perhaps it would have been more prudent to say you're representing what is heretofore maybe been a kind of a silent majority. You know, people are just maybe not speaking out as much as they feel comfortable in doing. I wanted to ask you about something that I had read, gosh, I think it was one of the articles you had debated this with Fred Keeley at one of the Democratic clubs.
I didn't actually realize I was debating.
And they declined to endorse the measure, as I understand it.
Yeah, one of the...
it's called the Croissant Democratic Club, I guess in San Lorenzo Valley.
It's the Croissant North County Democratic Club.
Okay, there you go.
And it's SLV and Scotts Valley.
Okay, right. Yeah. But
I didn't actually realize what I've never done anything. I've never done anything like this before. I mean, I've never voted against a school bond. My parents are both the school administrators. I'm a big fan. it would never cross my mind to question a school bond, and this time I've been inside the process, and so it did cross my mind because I've watched it evolve.
Your field is business, and so you look at the numbers.
Well, and I studied school finance in my doctoral program, so I may know more than the average teacher about how this stuff works. Although it's a very complex, just like the other parts of investment banking, they've constructed securities, special bonds, capital appreciation bonds, and blends of common interest bonds and capital appreciation bonds scheduled out over long periods to maximize the really the return to the bondholders. So there's a whole world that's realized that this, in investment banking, that realizes that this is a huge opportunity to make money.
Well, I just had to mention that because I know Fred. I've done some things around town with him. So just the kind of the vision of yourself and Fred, the clash of the titans over this thing.
I didn't feel like a titan.
That was reported, and evidently the folks saw the wisdom of your argument over Fred's. So I mean that's something to say. To your credit, it's interesting that somebody who maybe has not been outspoken about various things is now really kind of the spokesperson for the opposition to this Measure Q, which is a tremendously important and really tremendous interest in the community.
Yeah, I mean mostly. I kind of get the argument in favor of it. The college has come off of 5 years of difficult funding. We had a recession. State revenues were down. We struggled like crazy for a while. We've never dipped into our reserves. It's a well-managed, very conservative, fiscally conservative organization. But it's been a tough few years here, and we're just now coming into a more favorable funding climate from the state. And if we had a plan for a bond in June of 2015. We have a facilities master plan that shows $65 million.
Well, I saw the amounts continuing to rise exponentially as it went through. It started at $25 million, and all of a sudden it ended up at $310 or $623 or whatever it is, amortized over the life of the bond. I'm going, holy cow,
When you if you ask the question without any numbers and say, what do you absolutely need?
Right.
That number came in at about 65. And I would have debated whether 65 was a little generous, because some of what was in there seemed like it was padded out a little bit. But I wouldn't have been opposed to a $65 million bond.
Bruce?
I agree. I got to be on a radio show about a month ago, and I said, well, if you just transposed a couple of digits,
if it was on 130,
if it was 130 million instead of 310 million, I would probably, in fact, I would probably be watching the Warriors right now because I wouldn't even be worried about it. And there was an article in the Sentinel several weeks ago, and it quoted a couple of the trustees on Cabrillo's Board of Trustees.
I read that article.
They said that the statewide average for a community college district is to come to the voters every 6 years. And
right, I did see that.
I would rather see them have a definite project list of what they expect to accomplish in the next 6 years, and then just do that. And then when they show us what you've done, and then tell us what you need to do in the future. I'd rather see them come back to the voters and have more engagement with voters.
Well,
and what they're trying to do is just lock up this huge amount of money all at once, and I'm opposed to that.
Well, what's the
that 6 year that 6 year average is, you do bonds when you need to do construction. Cabrillo did so we had the 98 bond and 1998 bond, we had the 2004 bond. Those were 6 years apart, but those were sort of a set of projects. The 98 bond reconfigured the roads so that the 2004 bond could build the visual and performing arts section. It was it was almost like one continuous thing. But before the 1998 bond, the last bond that Cabrillo had was 25 years ago. So this idea that we do bonds every 6 years,
well,
yes, that's the average in the state, but there are colleges that don't do bonds for 20 or 30 years, and there are colleges that do them 4 years apart if they've got a sequence of projects that they're building out.
Well, what's the internal process, and is there any community input into how you decide how much, what your need is? How do you identify the need and then pair that with a number that's going to meet that need? Is that simply an administrative function of the university, a function of the trustees? Is there any kind of citizen input in that, community input, people who are potentially going to pay for it, maybe have some say in the number that's generated and the needs that are identified?
They didn't ask people like me.
Yeah.
They may have asked boosters, you know, alumni who, successful business people who are well-known philanthropists. There were, I read something that said that they had asked 30 members of the community. So they didn't put out a general.
Well, there's 260,000 people who live in Santa Cruz County. I think that many of them are taxpayers, and a great many of those are homeowners. So maybe it would have been, you know, and I guess there is something to say that, well, we are the people who understand what the needs of the university are. You know, we are trained professionals. You know, we do this. We're here every day. And to ask somebody, community member, you know, what do you think Cabrillo needs? Maybe they wouldn't be able to respond with a knowledgeable answer that would be helpful at all. Nevertheless, you would like to think that there's some input.
Well, I've followed the library. There's another Measure S.
Measure S?
The library one. I've followed that for years. And so if somebody asked about that measure, I would be able to tell them the history and some of the things that were considered. I mean, they had a menu at one point where they had low, medium, and high for all the library branches. And they kind of, it was like a Chinese menu where they kind of picked and chose what they thought needed to be done, and then they polled. Well, of course, they polled in this case too, but they polled to try to figure out what's the right size that we think we can do, and what are we actually what construction are we going to be able to afford if we do something that the voters will approve of. So I feel that this is very different. It's not a specific project list, and they're just going for the maximum that the law allows.
There is a requirement in the education code that community colleges are required to produce what's called an educational master plan.
Okay,
It's a 10-year view of what it is we're going to do that looks at the programs, it looks at the population in your community, the number of high school graduates, and basically predicts what your enrollment will be over the next 10 years, and then also lays out a strategy for the programs that you're going to offer, whether it's allied health programs like medical assisting or nursing or those kinds of things, or welding or green technology. That was a big initiative a few years ago to build out that center in Watsonville. And that educational master plan was updated in June of 2015. And page 26 of that master plan points out that we've got about 150,000 square feet of excess capacity at the college. So there's a formula that the Chancellor's office uses to take every kind of space that you have: classroom space, lab space, offices, conference rooms, cafeterias. They have about 10 different categories of space, and they look at what your needs are going to be through the year 2025, and then they look at the inventory of space that you have, and they compare those two numbers. And our available space versus our needs is in excess by about 150,000 square feet. That doesn't mean that there is 150,000 square feet of empty shuttered buildings. It just means that the buildings we have are not being utilized anywhere near the capacity that they could be utilized at.
And one of the arguments that they're making in support of Measure Q is that this is, and I hear this time and again, that they're supposed to be upgrading the technology that's available to the students, or the technology that's available to help the students succeed or move through in their professional careers. Is that a need that is commensurate with the $310 million bond issue?
Well, in the June So the educational master plan drives a set of other plans, and the one that's directly related to facilities is called the facility master plan. That flows from that educational master plan. It lays out the programs and the needs and the enrollment, and then the facility master plan is supposed to illustrate the sort of facility implications of that educational plan. And that plan in June of 2015, which it isn't even a year ago. No. June of 2015. Normally, we wouldn't look at technology that long term. So it had 2 year. Technology changes too fast.
Of course, yeah.
So it had 2 years of technology projects outlined, and it was about $2 million for the following 2 years. Yeah. So if you ran that out, if you presume that you would spend that for 10 years, then that would be $20 million. Yeah. The actual plan that they have for technology is $150 million. Of which we make a claim that a third of that can come from other sources, so the bond only would need to cover 2/3 of it, or about $100 million. Right. Some of the numbers on there are, I mean, there was no $300 million plan. Right. You know, there was a $65 million plan in June. In October, the bond consultants told us that we could get $310 million. And it took from October, the first time I saw a $310 million plan was in February. So whether it existed a little before that or not, it may have been bouncing around. But the first time it was presented publicly was in February.
They were also talking about $255 million in February. You know, these numbers are astronomical. It's 93 million miles to the sun.
It's actually 92 million. It's a little short of 93 million, but for the purposes of this show and that calculation, we won't be talking about water acre feet, Bruce. So
okay, we talked about that a little earlier.
I think people can't conceive of these.
You can't conceive of these amounts. You know, so when I try to understand $310 million, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is there's about 310 million people in the United States. That's the population of the United States. So that would be $1 for every man, woman, and child in the U.S. But Cabrillo Community College District, I think, is less than 1,000th of the United States. You know, it's Santa Cruz is less than Santa Cruz County is less than 1% of the state of California. Right. True enough. So when you translate that into how many dollars is this per person in the community college district? It's more than $1,000 per person, and so for a household, it's thousands of dollars. So when you vote, you know, if this measure passes, that's instantly an obligation for a household of thousands of dollars as soon as this passes. So to think of it locally, to think of $310 million locally, I have to translate it into potholes. Yeah. Because there are other unmet needs in our community. And one of the things I'm really afraid of is that this is going to suck all the oxygen out. The voters' willingness to vote for these things.
Familiar with the concept, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
So there's a figure for roads in this county, $480 million. I got this out of a report that in 2014 there was a report by CSAC. CSAC's the
Just for the whole county?
For the whole county, well, including all the cities in our county. CSAC is the California State Association of Counties, and Supervisor McPherson is the county's representative on CSAC. It's basically a lobbying organization. They lobby Sacramento for for funding, and so they put together this report to show the need across the state for roads. Our roads are falling apart. You can tell just by driving around. So if you think there's an unmet need for $480 million just for roads, frankly, I would rather vote for something that would solve that problem. Cabrillo's problem, I mean, I don't even think there's an urgent problem here. Cabrillo's, they are looking at the future, but
When you look at
transportation, Assemblymember Mark Stone told me last year that statewide, education's #1. That's the #1 issue people care about.
It has been a priority in the Brown administration. Absolutely.
Transportation is #2.
Yeah.
So that's the next thing, and so the roads have been neglected. That they're falling apart, and it's sort of like your teeth. If you get a cavity in your tooth and you get it fixed, then you're probably good for another 20 years. But if you don't do the maintenance that you need to do, then over time it gets much, much more costly.
Sure.
And so it's the same thing with roads, and the roads have been neglected. And then also the metro, we were talking earlier about the budget deficit for the metro. And so these are unmet needs. These are important needs that have not been met. So when we as a community are thinking, where should we target our millions of dollars, or hundreds of millions of dollars, the need at Cabrillo is just not that urgent. But there are other needs. I'll tell you, the fire districts are strapped.
Well, I'm glad that you're making that point, because I wish there were a closer linkage. I've done a lot of work with the group trying to forestall some of the cuts and discontinuances of the bus routes. And I wish that there were more of an understanding of how these things are linked and where you should really be putting your dollars to meet the urgent needs, and let the longer range needs, including in a master plan, perhaps take a lower priority.
Even if you wanted to try and compare apples and apples, so not potholes, but school bond to school bond. One of the arguments, I do have one of the arguments in favor. So $310 million is a lot of money. Consider this: the last two bonds were $85 million and $114. And if you correct that to current dollars, if you adjust it for inflation, that adds up to $290 million. So basically, the argument is that this 310 is close to the total of the last two bonds, and it's been 6 years, and so we have this sort of weird idea that there's a schedule when you it's time for another bond because it's been more than 6 years, which is. That's not how you borrow money. You borrow money when you need to build capital improvements.
And I'm glad that you're explaining that to our audience, many of whom are homeowners in Santa Cruz County who really need to have this information. And I think it's important to have.
Those last two bonds, if you think about Cabrillo, that was the entire Watsonville Center was built out of that. That was the entire Visual and Performing Arts Center with the Crocker Theater, the Samper Recital Hall, all those classrooms. It was the reconfiguring of the road at the intersection there on Soquel Drive. It was the two student activity centers that you see on the road. It was the entire Allied Health Complex. It was the Horticulture Center at the top of the hill. It was a complete refurbishment of several of the buildings and a bunch of technology projects. I mean, a lot got done with those last two bonds, and they don't add up together to 290 in today's dollars.
And
it makes 310 just seem like a staggering amount.
And I think the proponents are, kind of brushing aside the amount and the assessment burden that it would be on property taxes, and by saying, well, Cabrillo is seriously in need of infrastructure repair. The money that we're spending is going to help student graduation rates. Going to help veterans. Veterans are highlighted in this, of course, because there's so much emphasis now on veteran. I know as a homeless advocate, there's a lot of emphasis on homeless vets, a lot of emphasis on homeless benefits for veterans and whatnot. So there's a focus on that, and I see that a lot in the proponent argument. It's absolutely essential for this. Cabrillo's falling apart. The graduation rates are falling. The vets aren't being taken care of. And I sense that some of that may be true, but do we need $310 million to address that problem?
Well, there's an op-ed in the Sentinel today about from a veteran, and he is definitely not in favor of this bond.
No. I mean, the headline of that op-ed is, something about Cabrillo pandering to veterans.
That's close, and that's probably as a close approximation we can get, but that was what he was saying. Absolutely.
Well, he's a candidate for a PhD in political science at UCSC, so he is grad students are teachers, and so he has students, and they look at political arguments. You know, it's political science, so they look at how do you make an argument, and he says that he uses this as an example of something where the argument is emotional. It's an emotional argument when you read that.
Yeah.
It's not a reasoned argument about what the bricks and mortar are that we're going to build and why it's going to cost this amount of money. It's an emotional argument. Believe me, when I was at community college in 1972, there were veterans there. All of these same reasons that they talk about, yes, these are reasons to have community colleges, and that's why California has the community college system that it has, because of all these good reasons. But that's why the college is there to begin with, but that's not a good argument for spending $310 million.
And it is, I think, it evolved to some extent into a very emotional, very visceral argument. So we need this money, 17,000 students at Cabrillo are going to suffer. We can't have them, trying to further their professional careers on outdated equipment. And some of that may or may not be true, but you lose the sense of what the argument should be when you make it so sensational that the facts don't matter anymore.
And there's no question that there are problems at Cabrillo right now. Enrollment's off more than 20% since 2008.
So it's less than 13,000 at this point.
Students can't get the classes that they need. I teach business classes in the spring semester. At the beginning of the spring semester, just in the sections that I teach, there were over 75 students on wait lists for my classes.
Really?
And those are students who are not being served. I mean, once they go on a wait list, they're going to go somewhere else. Even if you could open up additional sections, they're scrambling to find that class someplace else as soon as it goes to the wait list.
But does the passage of Measure Q, will that have an impact on reducing that number?
No.
So
it doesn't have anything to do with how many classes we offer.
Yeah.
And if you talk to students about the problems that they experience with the college, overwhelmingly, the #1 problem they have is that they can't get through. They can't get the classes that they need at the times that they need them for their degree or for their transfer.
Right.
When I went to that Board of Trustees meeting, it went on for a long time. So.
You should be familiar with that. We used to spend hours at City Council in Santa Cruz.
So there were other topics than just the bond issue, and I snipped something out of the minutes for the meeting. It says faculty members Brian Lagakis, Arturo Cantu, Michael Mangan, Dustin McKenzie, Carl Ewald, and Barbara Schultz-Perez spoke about faculty compensation. Hard to attract high-quality faculty with low wages. Cabrillo faculty are among the lowest paid in the state of California. Low morale. Need this to be a priority. Many have multiple jobs to support families. High cost of living in Santa Cruz County. So when I heard that, I realized that this is the #1 problem at Cabrillo, is that they can't pay faculty enough. They can't recruit from outside the area because people can't afford to live here on the salaries that they have. Most of the faculty, I think, are adjunct faculty, and they get paid less than tenured faculty like Ray. So for them, it's even more difficult.
Right.
And so this is the problem that needs to be addressed, and this bond issue is not going to solve this problem.
It's just not the house, it's how we're living in the house that
Yeah.
we need to address, and I think that's a very good point. Now, they could not propose a bond issue that would increase teachers' salaries or tenures, that you just can't do
legal.
that. It's not legal, so,
Technically,
and there's the conundrum, right?
I mean, they have actually linked. I know we're in salary negotiations, or we were in salary negotiations.
Okay.
It was reported in my union newsletter that negotiations have been suspended until the district can learn how the bond turns out,
Right.
and what the funding climate looks like next year. So you can't pay salaries with the bond money, but the district is making the argument that, well, if we got the bond money, that would sort of free up money to, maybe help out with salaries.
Is that true, or is that just kind of a sleight of hand argument that says, well, one thing
You're not supposed to link those two things together.
Okay. The two things can be equally true when in fact they're not.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
You know, there are unfulfilled promises in the earlier bonds that we're already paying for.
I did notice that in the research that I've done. Yeah.
Since I live in SLV, you know, one of the ideas was that there would be a Scotts Valley satellite campus. And I can understand the problems with it because you can't offer the full range of courses at a satellite campus. And that means that even if a local student can get a couple of classes locally, they're still going to have to go to Aptos in order to get the rest. So I can understand the problem. I can understand why maybe it was a promise that should never have been made. But the 1998 bond issue said that there would be a satellite campus in Scotts Valley, and it's not there. They had one. They rented space for a while, but it's been closed now. Also, there's the last bond issue paid for dental hygiene facilities, which is a terrific program.
So I understand.
Terrific vocational program. But they almost closed the dental hygiene program a couple of years ago, or a year ago or two. And I think the only reason that was able to be maintained was because of a donation from Mrs. Crocker, who gave money for the Crocker Theater down there. So even when in the past, when they have told us specifically what they would do with the bond money, doesn't necessarily come true.
And I don't know if you remember, there was actually a grand jury report in 2007 where they looked into the Citizens Oversight Committee.
I noticed there was a mention of that,
And it was, it was all the sort of things that we've been talking about here, where it's a lack of transparency and not a comprehensive list of what the projects were, that the projects that got done were different than the projects that were promised, and those kinds of concerns. And there's no claim that anybody's got any malintent in any of those. These are all well-meaning people doing the best they can, I think. But it's hard to support something when it just seems to be kind of made up.
We're getting down to our last 2-3 minutes. I did want to ask you, since you seem to be a spokesperson for this, and Bruce, yourself as well, what has your response been as you go out and talk to people, and give them more information about this than certainly they may have had in the past?
I think people are surprised. I've been at just the last couple of days, I happen to have been at a few events around in town. And I guess people are seeing my name on the ballot argument. The ballot argument just went out in the last couple of weeks, so people are sort of recognizing who I am.
They recognize your name from the Fine Sentinel article that talked about that. So
and I've done a lot in the education in the county. Every superintendent of every district knows who I am, and I am amazed at how many people are coming up to me and saying, "Dang, I sent in my vote already before I read that thing," or who say thank you for speaking out.
And I think as much as anything, you mentioned it just a moment ago, it's the lack of transparency in this process. That people just don't get the information. They don't really get an argument that they can assess and they can evaluate and make it an informed decision.
Well, some of the information that's out there isn't even correct. The Sentinel said that these bond issues that are already there cost $12 and $16. Which adds up to 28, but anybody can look at their property tax bill and see that it's 36. When you add the 23 that Measure Q is asking for, that's $59 per $100,000 of assessed valuation. And remember that your assessed valuation goes up 2% per year. So this amount of money is going to be rising 2% per year. Which is different than the library measure, for example. That's a fixed amount.
I think the part that's even more alarming is when you do, the information is there. It's really hard to find. But when you actually dig in and find the information that's there, that's when you feel like $310 million is just a crazy number.
Hopefully this hour we've spent together here has made some of these points a little more clear to people, and maybe will prompt them to find out a little more themselves, and make the process itself a little less difficult to understand than it is. Dr. Ray Kaupp, Thank you for being here.
Can we mention our website?
Absolutely. Please do. This is a perfect opportunity.
so there is a website. Our organization is called Responsible Educators Against Measure Q.
All right.
And those initials, REAMQ. .org is our website. It's Responsible Educators Against Measure Q. REAMQ.org. And we've got all the documentation, all the master plans, lots of sort of factual information there so people can make up their own mind.
Great. And there's a way to contribute to the campaign. So
and
that'd be good
we're
too.
trying to get the word out.
Okay,
and
good.
It's hard
good.
because we're fighting an uphill battle. The Cabrillo College Foundation is supporting this campaign.
Okay.
They've given more than $100,000. So it's an uphill battle.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. This has been very educational for me and very informative for our viewers. And best of luck in really getting the word out on this. I think it's so important when we're talking about education. And Ray, thank you for some of what you do with the students and the faculty and being a teacher. It's such a very important role in today's society. And Bruce, good to see you again. Keep up the good work. Thank you both for being here. This has been Voices from the Village. I'm Steve Pleich. Tune in next time when we'll be talking about some other very important and challenging issues that are facing our community. And we're hoping to have guests as interesting as Dr. Ray Kaupp and my good friend Bruce Holloway. So this has been Steve Pleich, Voice from the Village. Thank you and good night.